Hello my fellow hirelings of House Telvanni, I'm Neloth, and I have just invested roughly 60 hours in Starfield and have more or less beaten the main quest line and have gotten to level 20 on 2 separate characters. There is still so much more to do in this game, and I don't know if I will truly be able to do everything Starfield has to offer, but even with my astonishingly little time spent on this game, I think I have enough experience to make a substantial review on Starfield. Before I start this review, I just want to make a few things clear. I will likely be talking more about bad things than good things in Starfield. This does not mean that I dislike Starfield, but I feel I need to highlight all of the bad things that I encountered. However, I will still be highlighting a great deal of good stuff as well. Also, this is simply my opinion, so please don't take this video as a personal attack or a definitive review. At the end of the day, we are all just dumbasses who make nothing but noise. Now, this review is going to be split into 3 sections: the good, the bad, and my final verdict. So, let's start with the good. The character creation we have is probably the best Bethesda has ever done in the history of ever, and it really feels like they listened to fans' complaints on how dumbed down character creation has become and took notes from Fallout New Vegas and even Cyberpunk in some regards. The idea of having backgrounds and traits which impacts gameplay, albeit minutely, is something that I had a great time with my favorite being the Ronin and the Soldier. I hope that we can have a system like this in the Elder Scrolls 6, leaning on the class system that we saw in Morrowind and Oblivion, because it was a really fun time role-playing as those characters with those backgrounds. The trait system is also a really fun addition to the game, and I loved having the option to choose my character's hometown, religion, and even my damn parents, which is exceptionally useful when role-playing and shaping your character's backstory and overall personality. I think the main story in Starfield is very interesting, and in the beginning it feels very reminiscent of Morrowind, where you are a part of a small, lesser faction joining other larger factions for experience, all the while gathering information on shit that's going down. I will refrain from speaking too much on the main story to avoid spoilers. However, I genuinely loved the story and thought it was very intriguing, especially with the concept of faith. However, the whole New Game Plus system is a thing I would like to not be included in the Elder Scrolls 6 and other future Bethesda games, with the exception of maybe a Starfield sequel if that is ever a thing. However, let me say that the New Game Plus system is actually very intriguing, and it was very interesting to go through the game a second time being in a new game. I don't want to talk too much about it, but it was really cool, but I just don't want to see it in other games. I never got to play all of the faction stories except for the Crimson Fleet, UC, and the Ryujan storylines, but I did find each of them to be very compelling, and the choices involved, especially in the Crimson Fleet story of either joining or betraying them, was really damn cool to experience. I also found myself getting really involved in minor side quests, especially on Neon, and I feel like these quests is truly where Bethesda shines, and it's one of the major highlights of this game, and what kept me really invested for hours on end. I loved those quests so much. And I never really found any of the side quests or any of the main quests to really annoy me that much. There was one teleporting quest in the main story, and there was one side quest in the well where all you did was flip fucking switches, and there was also one where you go to a temple and you have to absorb these glowy things that got annoying after a while, but for the most part, those are just one out of hundreds of quests. So for the most part, all of the quests are very well designed, with the exception of maybe 2. So, good props to Bethesda for that. And the dialogue system. Allow me to say that I fucking hated the dialogue system in Fallout 4, and it admittedly wasn't perfect in other Bethesda games either, but the way it is implemented in Starfield is phenomenal, and also utilizes many of the backgrounds and traits I mentioned in the character creation, and also utilizes skills that you pick up as you progress in the game. It's absolutely phenomenal, and I want to see this in future Bethesda games, regardless of the title, because it's just so good. Combat in Starfield is probably the best Bethesda has made so far. All the weapons look very beautiful and did not make a repeat of that fucking disappointment that was the assault rifle in Fallout 4. And at times I kind of forgot I was playing a Bethesda game and thought I was playing a damn Call of Duty game instead. The combat was very solid and I liked it. The jetpack is also a really fun element to combat, and gravity is just a cherry on top. Although I feel like only the player is affected by gravity and nobody else, and Sidonia feels very weird with how low gravity is, yet everyone acts like there's just Earth levels of gravity, but regardless, I do love the dynamics of gunplay when you add those two elements. The leveling system is also very solid. I don't really see it being this groundbreaking feature, nor do I see it as problematic. However, I will say that some of the skills are frustratingly more difficult to level up compared to others. For example, leveling Sneak is quite difficult because you need to get sneak attacks to level it. But if my sneak skill is low, the odds of me getting sneak attacks are already super low, and I need a higher sneak level to complete the challenges, and it just becomes this vicious, annoying cycle. However, this isn't a major issue, and it really doesn't ruin the game at all. Now, I'm going to refrain from talking too much about ships in space because that's unfortunately going to be in a different section of this video, but I do like the ship customization in Starfield, and it is a little confusing how many systems operate, but the construction of ships is such a fun undertaking, especially when you look inside your ship after you're done with your building. My only complaint is I hate that goddamn ladder you use to access different levels of your ship. It just takes too long, and I would just recommend boost packing instead, because that ladder is just, it's so slow. Now, we're not going to go into the bad just yet, but I'd rather go into a much more gray section of this video because I am super mixed on the cities in Starfield, and it is something I want to discuss not only in this review, but also in future videos as well. The cities like New Atlantis, Aquila City, and Neon are all very appealing to the eye, and each have a very unique and dynamic theme that sets them apart, which I very much like, and is leagues better than Fallout 4's 2 cities, and copy and paste smaller holds in Skyrim like Dawnstar and Morthal. However, I really think that these cities are much too big considering there is no map, and there may be entire sections of cities you will not even know exist until your 3rd or 4th playthrough. For example, did you know that there is a slums section in New Atlantis called The Well? Well, I sure fucking didn't until my goddamn 2nd playthrough, and I only found the whole ass section by complete accident. I remember Todd Howard once saying how he disliked how small the cities in Skyrim were, but I completely disagree with his beliefs. Skyrim cities were so iconic because of how easy they were to navigate and how simple it was to find stores and NPCs. But in Starfield, after 40 hours, I still don't know where anything is in New Atlantis aside from Constellation and my parents' house. The fact that there also isn't a local map, like there has been in every other Bethesda game, makes navigation much more confusing. And the NPCs, my god, the NPCs are so terrible and ugly and have become nothing but clutter. Another thing I loved about Skyrim is how in every city, all of the NPCs had names, backstories, family trees, and everything, which makes for more memorable experiences. I can probably list every NPC in Whiterun because of how memorable they are. But instead, Bethesda went a more cyberpunk GTA-like approach by including dozens of NPCs that become nothing but props. This is also worse because in Fallout and the Elder Scrolls, mainly the Elder Scrolls, I would walk up to everyone so I could learn everything I could about them and maybe find a fun mission in the process. But in Starfield, there are just so many insignificant NPCs that I end up just walking past everyone now, which makes me feel like I'm missing out on some interesting adventure. I just don't know, but I have to because I don't give a fuck about citizen number 86. And I really hope Bethesda or some modder fixes the NPCs to make them look less randomly generated and more handcrafted, because most of them look like they're wearing fucking wigs they got from the Lost and Found, and don't get me started on their Mass Effect Andromeda looking eyes. Now it is time to officially talk about all the bad stuff I have seen in this game, even though it seems like I already have from discussing the cities, but whatever. So, Starfield is a space game. So why the fuck is the space part of the space game so shit? Like, most of the planets that Bethesda advertised you can explore are barren and offer literally nothing. There are some pretty looking planets with life or a rock with a cool view of a gas planet, but when there is nothing of substance and every randomly generated location is 600 miles away from each other, it de-incentivizes exploration and becomes a whole mechanic that you just barely explore because what's the fucking point? And the UI. The UI is one of the worst I have ever seen in not just a Bethesda game, but just in general, especially when it comes to fast traveling throughout planets. I can't tell you how annoying it is to go through 4 different loading screens just to go to a planet. First, you have to go to the galaxy map, which is so fucking confusing. Then you have to go to a different solar systems. Then you have the planet. And my god, if you have an outpost on a rock not in a major system, like the ones that house New Atlantis or Aquila City, good fucking luck finding them. Because I literally had lost 2 outposts because I genuinely don't know where the hell I put them. Which is funny when you think about it. Honey, I lost a planet. But mechanically, it's just unacceptable. Also, speaking of the outpost system, why is it infinitely more complicated than the settlement system in Fallout 4? In Fallout 4, you just pick stuff up, dump it into a workbench, and you typically have enough supplies to do whatever the hell you want. But in Starfield, most of the items you pick up can't be deconstructed, and I genuinely don't know if I can dump my resources in my outpost or it's all supposed to be stored on my ship. I just don't know, and because of the confusion and the poor tutorial, I basically gave up after like 15 minutes of outpost building because what's the point? I don't know what the hell's going on. And this is just a side note, but I really do hope Bethesda does away with the whole settlement outpost system and goes back to something more simplistic like the Hearthfire houses in Skyrim or the Stronghold system that is seen in Morrowind, just more in depth. However, this may be a controversial take. Moving away from space, some playstyles in Starfield are unfortunately worthless compared to others. For example, Unarmed completely sucks in Starfield and is completely unacceptable, especially when you look at Fallout 4's Unarmed system, which wasn't the best, but is just leagues better than Starfield's, which is unfortunate because these newer games should be progressing in these fields, not regressing. Additionally, Melee as a whole is kind of underwhelming when you take into account that you can't modify melee weapons like in Fallout 4, and there are just so few weapons. For Melee, there is a shank, axe, knife, cutlass, and a wakizashi, and that's all I ever saw. I think there's also a techno knife, but that's it. And there are additionally 0 unarmed weapons, which is just disappointing, and all this melee talk better get fixed in a patch or a DLC. Also, I really hate how many ammo types there are in Starfield. It makes collecting or buying ammo for your gun just really annoying. The worst is the particle beam weapons, which have different ammo types for rifles or pistols. Like, Was that really necessary? Did you really need to have a heavy particle ammo thing and a light particle ammo thing? Couldn't you just have particle ammo and just call it a day? Why? So that's all the bad, and now on to my final verdict. Clearly, if I invested 60 damn hours into Starfield, it must be good, and I can safely say that Starfield is in fact a good game. It isn't the best, and there are problems that I hope are not repeated in future Bethesda titles, but as of right now, I am content with Starfield and will probably still be playing this game 3 weeks from now, trying to do all the faction quests in a New Game Plus save. So, with that being said, my official Telvanni ranking for Starfield is a 7 out of 10. Now, I understand this may seem low, but I would argue that a 7 is a very good score, demonstrating that Starfield is a solid game. There are some that consider Starfield to be the greatest game Bethesda has ever made, which I would have to disagree with, but I can understand why you would believe so. However, there are others that, for some reason, consider this to be one of the biggest pieces of shit of the year, next to Redfall or Gollum, and those people clearly have something wrong with them, because that's just not the case. This game isn't that bad. It's good. It is a solid game. And there were quite a few streamers and YouTubers that played Starfield and said that it either sucked or was rather boring, and to them, most of those guys never really were heavy into Bethesda games and didn't know what they were getting into, so those guys, I understand where they're getting at, but they clearly don't know what a Bethesda game truly is. For Starfield, as long as you make your own fun and focus on quests, you will enjoy yourself. And that's all I wrote, my first review of a game. I have never reviewed a game before like this, and I tried to ignore other people's views and focus solely on my experience with the game to make this review feel like my own. So, if you do feel differently, that is completely fine. So, make sure to like the like button, like the subscribe button, and like the bell notification down below to be updated on future videos. And I will see you whenever the fuck I decide to upload again. House Telvanni be with you.
Please, O hero of Skyrim, I shall be ever so grateful.